A lot of things we can say sex is. Like, I've heard people say, well, we only had anal sex, so I'm still a virgin.
Whoa, where they do that at? What is going on, everybody? We are back at it again with yet another reaction video. So happy that you guys decided to join me again. It's your man RST. And as you can clearly see, today we're going to be talking about, is sex before marriage a good thing? Historically, for whatever reason, this has always been a hot topic, a very taboo topic. So here today, we're going to be reacting from a video from Jubilee that kind of deals with both sides. If anybody follows this channel, you know that they love to take groups of people with different varying opinions on a particular topic, sit them down, and they discuss it. Very cool, entertaining channel. And so today, they're going to be talking about, is sex before marriage a good thing or a bad thing? Without any further ado, let's get right into it.
I have not had sex outside of marriage.
I grew up in the church, and so I was a typical, like, not gonna have sex, not gonna do A, B through Z. I just got out of a 2.5-year relationship. Coming out of it, I'm so much more empathetic to how absolutely tough that is on a day-to-day.
Yeah, I did not have sex prior to getting married almost 3 years ago. It made me test if this wasn't a serious relationship going somewhere, then I could just focus on kind of my other things.
Did I want to wait? Absolutely. But love is a powerful thing. And when love comes in, it blinds a lot. I wanted to say, hey, let's just take this time. And if we're going to get married, let's just wait. We weren't on the same page when it came to that. So when that relationship ended, I made a vow to God and myself to wait. So I do consider myself a born again virgin, and I'll enjoy sex in marriage like 10 times more than I did outside of it.
I've heard, my whole life, oh, sex before marriage is a sin. But then, murdering someone is always a sin, right? But why is sex before marriage a sin, but after marriage it's not a sin anymore? Yeah. It's just because you have a piece of paper saying, oh, we're married, now we can have sex. So
I agree with you.
So here, in my opinion, she brings up a very valiant point, one that I think we all should actually delve into. Anybody that even remotely grew up in, the church like I did, sex before marriage really isn't something that is applauded. You are always taught that you should wait before sex and that somehow it's a moral sin to engage in sexual acts prior to marriage. However, one of the things that we also should explore is that, how do we actually define marriage? How does the Bible, or any religious text for that reason, define marriage? Because in this day and age, in the United States, like she had alluded to, it's a legal document that legally binds you between two people. So is that the actual baseline that we need to have before we can engage in sexual intercourse with our loved ones? It's a really interesting perspective. At least in my experience in the church, we were always taught that every single sin, for that matter, is equally leveled out. If you telling a small lie to your mother or father, that is just as bad as murdering somebody. So one question that we should definitely ask and challenge ourselves is, if a small little white lie is just as bad as murdering somebody, why is there such a heavy stigma placed on sex and our ability to explore that even throughout our adolescent years? Why is it constantly seen as some type of sin if we want to express our sexuality even prior to marriage? Something that we should definitely think about.
My first time was a positive experience.
My first time was with my first serious girlfriend towards the end of high school. Disorganized and messy and silly at times, but I look back on it really fondly, and we were losing our virginities together, which I think was a really nice thing to share.
I mean, I always went into it thinking, oh, the first time I have sex, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be so bad. My heart's gonna feel so sad that I'm not married and stuff. But I felt none of that. I was like, this is great.
Argument used so much against abstinence and celibacy is that, how do you know what you're doing? How do you, you're not going to be trained. I think there's a cool part of learning that process with each other and learning that with one person. And I think that's just something that
helps you appreciate and love that person more?
My first time having sex was not a negative experience. It just wasn't necessarily a positive experience. I was 14 and I just decided I had to do it. I had sex in the back of a hot rod car with a guy who was, I think, about 18. The way in which it was positive now, when I look back on it, is that I started young and I had a lot of colorful experiences, some of them positive, some of them negative. But now I'm able to take all of that experience and use it to help other people.
The one piece of advice that I would give to everybody out there that still hasn't had that experience, don't feel as though you have to be pressured into doing it. Whether you're a man or a woman, if you feel as though deep down your virginity is something that you're not ready to give up yet, then just don't do it. As for men, oftentimes, a lot of our quote unquote masculinity is placed on how well we can perform and how many women that we can get in bed with us, not necessarily realizing that a lot of that is just ego driven. Don't be in a rush to necessarily give up your virginity to appease everybody else. Let's get back into it.
Sex can be physical from someone's own thought process, but I think you still do know that there's an emotional side to it. And so even sometimes I just have friends that I know have said, yeah, this is just sex for me too, you know, but that's not truly how they feel. A lot of the time it does mean something more, or they are hoping that it turns into something more.
I definitely agree with that, but I would also say there's the polyamory community, there's the swinger community, there's the kink community, there's the just sex positive community. There's people who go to sex parties every weekend and just have fun with each other. I think there are a lot of communities that you just might not be a part of where sex just for sex is actually a very normal, accepted, and positive thing.
And that's fine and well. But I do believe that when two people are connected in an intimate way, a soul tie is connected. And when you are about to enter into another relationship or enter into something new, you're carrying someone else with you. It's like a web that's being weaved into someone else. It's an emotional attachment. But to some people, I do think that it can just be, I guess, a one and done, thank you, next, whatever. But I do believe that you're carrying a soul tie when you're physically and sexually connected.
So I think one of the reasons why so many people have this high notion of what's your body count is because there's an idea out there that there's a unique pair bond and soul bond that you have. So irregardless of how many other partners that you have further down the line, you're spiritually and psychologically always going to carry a piece of that person with you. Now, is there any particular science to necessarily back that up? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you guys can inform me. However, there is another side to that, and where a lot of people just see sex as that, just sex. I think these kind of conversations and subtle nuances are really interesting because we're trying to define really what sex is and what it means to us in particular. Now, I will say from my own personal experience, back in the day when I was, going through my little immature phase in my early 20s, I didn't necessarily understand the implications that sex can have when it came to forging certain relationships. I remember there was this young woman that I was seeing at the time, and we had kind of developed feelings for each other. And of course, we did the deed, you know what I mean? And quite honestly, in the back of my mind, I wasn't really feeling the relationship like that. Certain characteristics I did like, but there were a lot of red flags. And I remember having a conversation with my mother, and she blatantly asked me, did you sleep with her? And I was like, yeah, I did. And she just shrugged like, oh my freaking God, why would you do that? Again, me being as naive as I was, I didn't understand the implications that sex could have when feelings are involved. For some people, when they start catching feelings with you and you have that physical connection with them, yes, it is going to serve to potentially enhance the relationship. Now, for select groups of people, that may not be the case. But all in all, I don't think there's necessarily an end-all be-all solution to this. I truly believe that some people just view sex as just that, sex. And for others, sex definitely means a lot more, because now not only do you have the spiritual and mental connection with that person, but physically you are becoming one. And that in and of itself is a very powerful thing that shouldn't be overlooked as well.
Sex ed should encourage safe sex over abstinence.
I want to run.
Yeah, I'm gonna say over abstinence. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and sit down.
Welcome.
The reason why I chose to sit is because although I'm pro abstinence and I'm celibate, education is education. Kids are going to make their own choices. There's free will. They're going to act on impulse. They're going to act on love. They're going to act on whatever's present to them. And if you don't educate them on the safest way to go about that, how are they going to learn? I don't believe it should be over abstinence, but I do agree that it's a big part of education for sure.
Having choice, I think, actually in some ways works for the abstinence folks, because it's like if it's this bad thing that you shouldn't do, then of course kids are going to want to do it. And so I think like by just giving all the information and offering choices, then people can make a choice.
Yeah, so I think you guys addressed a lot. And I think when it comes with education, because knowledge is power, we have to teach kids why. It is not, don't do this or God hates you. It's not that. It should be, we love God. God sent his son who gave us the ultimate sacrifice. And so we are sacrificing a physical thing that we are naturally drawn to.
I disagree because I think you're painting just one side of something that's really important, and it's the safety side, but there should also be, if you feel like it's meaningful to you, you should definitely wait until you're excited about doing this. And here's the safe way to do it. I still see an imbalance where now it's becoming taboo to talk about the option of purity. My desire is that we don't allow the next generation to think that sex is completely meaningless and has no emotion or feeling or reason,
I think everyone has their own journey. Waiting is not mine, but it's yours, and that's awesome. So just being accepting of everyone's sexuality, whether it be super high or non-existent at all, and just being open to listening to other people's opinions.
Now we get into the big meat and potatoes of the conversation. Is teaching abstinence good or bad when it comes to our educational system? And my perspective is, it's really important to be 110% transparent with adolescents as they're going through their formative years. It's really important to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be sexually curious. It's only a natural thing. You can't fault a teenager for being sexually curious, especially while they're going through puberty. Hell, adults to this day are always going to be sexually curious. However, I do think that there should be another side of that conversation. It's okay if you want to go out and you want to have sex with somebody that you find attractive. However, please understand that there are STIs, STDs, the risk of pregnancy. If you do so happen to get a girl pregnant, are you ready to take care of that child? And like I had previously mentioned, just know that for some people, especially when feelings get involved, the whole notion of sex turns into something completely different. Now, as far as teaching abstinence in schools, it actually can be detrimental to young adolescents coming up throughout our educational system, because many states and the federal government as a whole have tried to pump in as much resources and much money into these schools to teach abstinence. And what they found in the long run was that it's starting to have adverse effects. The more that you tell a teenager to not do something and not engage in something, guess what? They're going to want to do it. It's going to drive up their curiosity even more. So all in all, the studies have backed this, in which if you teach abstinence, teenage pregnancies tend to go up. The more that you shield people from the rest of the real world, the more detrimental it is for their overall growth and well-being in having their ability to forge their own opinions and perspectives on how the world is and how it should be. I don't necessarily think that we need to take this purity approach, because what is purity? What may be purity in your religion, it might be absolutely barbaric in another one. We shouldn't be playing purity police. Rather, we need to be forthcoming and honest when we have these kinds of conversations, especially when it comes to sex. One of the main things that has always sparked my curiosity when it comes to discussions about sex is, why do we stigmatize it so much? And this kind of goes back to the conversation we had about, our sins weighted equally when it comes to murder, when it comes to telling little white lies. Why is it that sex is always such a large stigma in these conversations when it comes to raising our youth and teaching them what's right and what's wrong? Personally, I think that people have always wanted to control access to who can have sex and those who can't have sex. In conclusion, all in all, if you want to have sex, by all means, engage in sex, as long as it's consensual, of course. And don't feel the need to engage in certain sexual acts if deep down you feel as though you're not ready. If you're a parent who's watching this and you want to find ways of going about having these kinds of conversations with your kids, if they ask you, just be 110% transparent. Because deep down, if you are a parent, you probably would want your kid to wait a little bit longer. And you can do that by being forthcoming and honest with them and saying, hey, you are perfectly fine for wanting to explore your curiosity when it comes to sex. It's a natural thing. But there can potentially be downsides to that, especially at a young age. Just be honest. So all in all, that is what I have for you fine folks watching this at home. If you like this video, make sure that you leave a like. Make sure that you comment down below things that I can improve on, things that you would like to see me react to. And what are your perspectives when it comes to this conversation around sex? Should we teach abstinence, or should we be brutally honest and forthcoming about sex and open about it? Other than that, I'll catch y'all in the next one.